The absolute completely essential music teaching tools that I could never live without. Just kidding, the only thing you actually need to teach is probably a piano, although you could probably teach a lot about music without a piano even present. These things sure are useful though. The vast majority of the things on this list are pretty darn cheap, and these are the cheapest of all. Tiny little post-its or sticky notes. So these ones, I would guess that's like 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. I haven't measured it, but like an inch squared or thereabouts. These are the perfect post-its. Now, I have a lot of different post-its and I use all of them, but these are the most frequent. So if you asked me if I had to pick one type of sticky note, which one would I pick? It would be these. Because I actually use a lot of sticky tabs as well. And when I can't put my hands on those, I also use these to mark pieces that we play. But the real reason these are perfect is because you can put them over the music, like you can cover a specific bar, but you can also fit them at the top of the page if you want a quick reminder, like I'll often write 1, dynamics, 2, tempo, or like whatever, a little list that's just like a quick reminder of what we did at the lesson. There's so many uses for these, but yeah, the tiny little post-its, the square ones, those would be top of my list. Next on my list is some kind of little erasers. Now these are, well, this is a non-Iwako one, this is an Iwako one, doesn't matter to me. It doesn't even matter if they're like this, like I don't mind the flat ones or whatever, but they have to be the size, like not bigger than a piano key, so that you can put them on the piano keys. And I also use these as game tokens all the time. We use them to lay out chords on the piano. We use them to mark different things. Just for fun, we use them for crossing the river, which is a practice game where you move the guys to the other side of the piano. I mean, I just use them so much. And yeah, they don't have to be erasers. These just happen to be the most accessible, small, really cute little animal toys that you know are the perfect size for the keys. So that's why piano teachers are obsessed with them. And I'm no different. I mean, yeah, they're just the ideal little adaptable toy for piano lessons. Number 3 on my list is dice. Now, doesn't have to be ones like this. These are our own, so you can buy these in the Colourful Keys store, but they are like custom printed ones that we had done. So the red one, for example, is all the major keys, and then the blue is all the minors. If you're wondering what the difference is, it's like spelled correctly, you know. So the minor one says C sharp, not D flat, for example. I also have in my hand our note value one. We have a few others, you can check them all out. Even if it wasn't these though, I would still want a die. I would want a regular die. So even if I couldn't have the fancy music ones, I would want a regular die just for everything. Yes, games, but also randomizing anything. If a student is supposed to be picking a chord to start a composition and they're just humming and hawing, let's just roll the die. You know, let's just pick it this way. And we can use them to mix everything up and just randomize anything. It's always more fun when they get to roll the die and do it based on that rather than us saying, how about we do this? You know, that's just, it feels like just boring and dull and like your teacher said to do it. But if they roll the die and get the same result, it's instantly more fun. Number 4 is one that won't fit on the piano here, and it won't fit on the screen the way we are, but this is my floor staff. It is just like a big blanket that has a grand staff on it, and I have these to go with it. So it's kind of 2 things, but if I could only have one, I would have the floor staff and I'd use something else. Could improvise something else for these. But I made this myself. We have a post on our blog, Colourful Keys blog, with different suggestions from people of how to make them yourself, like different DIY ways that teachers have done this. You can also buy one in our shop if you like. If you're like, DIY is not for me. I know there are people like that. So you can just go buy it. Whatever it is, if you don't have one, oh my gosh, this is the most useful item. So adaptable, so many circumstances, but particularly if you teach any kind of beginner students, it makes such a difference. Because you just scale everything up, right, with this floor staff, and you can like climb on it and you can move stuff around, and suddenly so many things become clear that when they're small and on a page, students are not getting, like they're not getting what we're talking about with intervals or with note names or, I mean, anything. You can put anything on. So I made mine to this size. I got these first. And I got these from Mr. Price, which is a, like, what would you call it? Like a budget shop, like a dollar store or the equivalent, right? Yeah, they just had these in Mr. Price and I looked at them and said, huh, I can make a staff where the notes would be that size. So that's what I did. But you don't have to make one. You could buy one. In any case, so many uses for this thing. The next tool I couldn't live without, almost couldn't live without at this stage, is Vivid Practice, which is our practice app and teacher organization site. This thing saves so much brain space. I would say is the number one thing for me. Like, people have different highlights of why they use a practice app or a assignment management system, learning management system. But for me, since I started using a digital system, it's this. Because you can have a whole library of assignments. You can have everything already added to them and everything you want to say said the right way, like the ideal way. You know, when you used to, or maybe you still do, when I used to write in a student's notebook, you know, you're writing in the middle of a lesson and you write instructions or a reminder or whatever, and you don't quite say it the perfect way, but like you have to move on. And you remember, oh, maybe this is the right way to say it. Like, oh, I'll bank that for later, but you don't really say it that way next time. What if it was saved and it was your favorite way to explain that thing, or your favorite resource to attach or link to include, or whatever it is? So that's part of it, but also having each of your students' full history of their assignments. So we have it that you can search a student's assignments. So you can see, did they ever do the Clementi Sonata in C in another arrangement or whatever? You can just search. And so if you do books out of order or you do random sheets and you're not sure what they've done and haven't done, you can just look it up. You have their whole history there. There's even more than that. There's so many different parts of Vivid that I think are so useful. But for me, for sanity saving, it's that. It helps. It's my second brain, right? For all my students, I keep track of about 70 students in our studio. So it just saves all this space back here. I feel like that's where the empty room comes from. Number 6, this is not specific to specific brands or anything like that, just like the erasers weren't, but some kind of coloured pens or pencils I have to have. I remember the days when I thought you couldn't write on music with anything but pencil. Like, that's how I was taught and that's how I taught for a long time. It was only pencil, no colours ever, because you have to be able to erase it, right? You don't have to be able to erase it. And there are options if you do. Having colours that we can mark things up, I often say to students, like, I'll highlight all the dynamics in a beginner's piece or something like that and say, huh, did you see those before? Oh my gosh, they're not invisible anymore. Like, might sound a bit snarky, but it doesn't come across that way. Things like that. Highlighting things, putting things in the students' hands as well, saying like, what should we add to this score to help you remember this or that? Stuff like that. So some options. These are just basic highlighters. Love a good basic highlighter, but I like it not to have the really wide tip. So, and I don't like the little stubby ones. I want a full-sized highlighter. So those are my ones. I actually have to replace some of these, so I need to get another pack. Then I have coloured pencils. These are actually erasable coloured pencils. So if that part is important to you, you can get erasable coloured pencils. And then these are my latest edition. They are also erasable and they're so cute. I saw these all over the place when I was on holidays in Switzerland and then Germany. So I didn't buy them in Switzerland because Switzerland's really expensive. And I knew I was going to Germany and I was like, I bet they have these in Germany. If I come across them there, it's meant to be. If not, no big deal. So I saw them again when we were in Germany in the small town we were staying in just like the local stationery kind of card shop. I was like, oh, great. And they were indeed quite a lot cheaper. Sorry, Switzerland, but you are quite expensive. Anyway, so these are just 2 examples. I got 5 of them because they're too adorable. Oh my gosh. So this guy is a little like dinosaur. And this other one is a llama. And they're so cute. And they come in different colours. So like the colours on the tip there, that's blue, that's green. I made sure to get a few different colors. But yeah, they are erasable. So they're like the friction pens, which are very popular. And I have some of those, but these I think erase slightly even better than friction, or at least as good as friction. I think it's slightly better because in friction you can still see the like indent. If that makes any sense. Anyway, but they're also just so adorable. Oh my gosh, so cute. So if you're going to ask me, they are Legami Milano, and they're just called erasable pens. But yeah, that's the brand, Legami Milano. I don't know how available they are elsewhere. I hadn't come across them until I was traveling in mainland Europe. But once I saw them, I couldn't get them out of my head. They're too cute. Number 7 on my list. Fred is here representing. This is Fred. He's named Fred after Fred the Fish from Piano Safari. But, I mean, no official association with Piano Safari. He is representing all my Beanie Babies. So they don't have to be Beanie Babies. You can have other stuffies. Like, don't go out of your way to get these. The thing is with Beanie Babies, these were a huge craze when I was like 8 or 10, some age around there. I had loads of them. Like, I collected them. It was just a fun thing to do when I was a kid. And so I still had them. They were like in my parents' attic. And my mom at some point was like, get your stuff in my attic, you know, that whole system. I was like, fine. And I was already teaching at that time. So I took them and I started using them in lessons. They're just perfect. They are my ideal little stuffy for lessons. Why? Okay, again, not too big. Perfect size, just like my little animal erasers. I think these are the perfect size. And they have that weight because they're Beanie Babies. So they have beans in them. Not literal beans, I don't think. That means you can throw them. So combine them with the floor staff that I showed you earlier. You can throw them, see where it lands, name the note, all that kind of thing. And then they're also just a great size to like sit on top of the piano, and they sit really well and all of that. And yeah, I have a lot of characters that come out and they just enhance things. They bring things to life. Like, I have so many different animals, and like there's some pieces where I have a go-to animal, but also just in the moment I'll come up with an analogy and bring over the animal for that analogy, and it just makes things more playful, more fun. Number 8 on my list is not quite as jazzy and fun. It's YouTube Premium. Weird one to put on this list. But as I was going through, I was thinking about subscriptions, other than my own, that I would definitely need to have as tools. And like, there are lots of fun music theory websites and different things that I use from time to time and bits and pieces. But for me, if I had to narrow it all down and like couldn't live without something, it would be YouTube Premium, because I can't have ads playing in lessons. So yes, you can get ad blockers and things, so that would be an alternative if you don't have the budget, but something to stop the ads in YouTube, because without doing that, I wouldn't be comfortable using YouTube in lessons. I know people will like mute and turn away the thing until the ad's done, but then we're kind of wasting time. I know you probably plan around that, but it's just awkward, right? And I wouldn't be comfortable having an ad play in a lesson because I don't know what it is until it plays, right? So it could be inappropriate, probably not wildly inappropriate if it's shown as an ad on YouTube, but you know. And I know some people will use the YouTube Kids app, but that doesn't have a lot of videos, because to put videos in this, here's some behind the scenes. If you mark a video as made for kids in the way YouTube is set up, you not only does it, not have inappropriate ads, which is great, but it also can't have loads of different features that seem unrelated to the fact that it's made for kids. I don't know, they obviously have their reasons, but it's awkward. And therefore, if you're using the YouTube Kids app, there's loads of stuff you can't see. And people won't check made for kids on a video that's just someone playing a particular piano piece, because that restricts it from so many other things. So that's not a good workaround. Anyway, so it would be either never showing anything on YouTube or playing anything off YouTube versus having YouTube Premium, to me. To have that security that there's not going to be any inappropriateness or ads. Why do I need to use YouTube in lessons? I don't need to, but it is so useful to be able to play examples of pieces, look up different things, even to look at the visuals together. So like, I have a second screen attached to my computer that I can spin around to face the student. So they can look at it, even with the sound off sometimes, to like look at the gestures or the movement that somebody is using and the technique stuff. There's so many uses for it, as well as like fun little music theory videos occasionally to illustrate a point. And yeah, it's just a great tool to have. And when I was thinking about this for the video, I have Spotify Premium as well, and I do use that sometimes, but more pieces are on YouTube, so if I had to choose one, I'd be choosing YouTube. Number 9, stress balls. Weird. Are my students stressed? No. But these are great fidgets, and I know people will have like fidget spinners or the fidget cubes. I can't be dealing with that. They make noise. How does that not drive you insane? So I'm all for giving students something to do with their hands if they focus better while moving, right? If they need to listen to you for a second, listen to a piece, whatever, and they just can concentrate better while doing something, great. That's a great thing to give them. But I'm not putting up with anything that makes noise. So stress balls are ideal. These have like fun little shapes. I have some that are like a kind of jelly egg. I don't know where he's gone at the moment, but anyway. Yeah, I have different ones. So I use them for that as fidgets. And we also use them when we're talking about, you know, the hand shape. This is a thing from Irina Gorin, Tales of a Musical Journey. She talks about apple hands. And we don't want hands really curved like this. But if we're looking at a preschooler, this size is actually perfect because their hand's a lot smaller, right? So it's not super curved if they're holding it. And what she talks about there is, you know, gently holding the apple, but we don't squeeze it because then we're just crushing the apple. So the tension idea and all that stuff. So a lot of different uses for them, but most common is just a student is fidgeting. They can have this on the side and just pick it up whenever they feel like they need to just do something without it being distracting or stopping them from learning. The final tool on my list, very basic, so straightforward, but so useful. You can see it behind me over there, just about. I actually have several, is a whiteboard. Whiteboard marker. So much you can do with that. I have a few that are handheld, like loose, just like one is like A3 size, another one's a little bit smaller, that I bring out for students to write on, for me to write stuff on, and I write stuff up there all the time. It's so useful, simple. I don't need to explain to you what you use a whiteboard for, but it's not something that it's always in a teaching room, and I think it just enhances our teaching, lets us illustrate things so quickly, so much easier than getting a piece of paper even, because we tend to do it on a larger scale on a whiteboard. Yeah, just basic, but fantastic. So over to you, there's 10 of mine. What teaching tools would you not be able to live without? Prefer not to live without is maybe a better way to put that. I would love to hear from you in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed already and hit the notification icon, make sure to do that right now.